Hi, everyone. I go by Jake, and for 10 years, I lived with the unshakable belief that I was happily married. I'm a truck driver, so you know me as one of the guys that lives for the road, moving from one state to another, and carrying not just food, but even furniture on my back. It's a difficult job, but it pays the bills, and for the longest time, I thought I earned it considering the good things that I did in life. Everything seemed structurally set when I was married to Lily and began to build a life with her. It was a mutual understanding, a collaboration, or at least it seemed so to me. I undoubtedly loved her and was confident that she loved me too. We both agreed that children were not only out of the question for the future, but also never a desire for the two of us, and that did not bother either party whatsoever. We moved to our own beat. I worked most of the time, while she took care of chores around the house, and that was the deal. I won't even attempt to deny it. Trucking is difficult. You're always on the road, working long hours overnight with little to no time between shifts to rest. On occasion, I would set a plan to be home for the weekend, but if a last-minute freight order was processed, it would force me to stay for an additional day or two. That's just how it was back then. But no matter how frustrating any job got, I always made it a point to come home whenever I could. Because for me, being married does not translate to working and paying bills 24/7. It meant doing things and performing functions, being there, being physically present. Even when exhausted, I wanted to be home with Lily, and that's how I viewed a marriage. Unfortunately, that was not the case. In what I saw as sobering reality, my wife and I had clearly hit the wall at some point. I can't quite explain how, but I knew something shift within Lily and I. By this period, Lily and I had already been married for 7 years. Noticeably, during most of our marriage, life felt pretty stable. We might not have been the world's most passionate couple, but life had a certain rhythm. After my extensive travel, it wouldn't be unusual for her to welcome me home with a hug, a kiss, and some flowers, which meant she was happy I was back after a long time. But then, things slowly started becoming different. Slowly, everything became apparent when she began withholding the more intimate acts. Before, she would often tease me, make jokes, or simply lean in towards me when she wanted us to watch a movie together, but that was no longer the case. I thought perhaps she could have been worn out or under a lot of stress. I mean, I get it, life can be exhausting at times. In this case, it was more than a difficult week or rough month. Every day was the new average. Things would not sahang unless I put in some effort to start them. And even when I did try, it was very clear she had been detached from the whole ever so slightly alive conversation. It seemed like she obliged, not at all motivated to. After that were the messages. When we prearranged drives, we would text one another a lot. Just small things such as, "How's the trip treating you?" But without warning, the responses grew less elaborate and farther in time between. I would send a message, and if I did happen to receive a reply, it would take a couple hours to come through. Often she would message me back with something very bland like "yeah" or "okay." There was no further explanation, no wondering about how my day had been. It was almost as though she was drifting farther and farther away from me. I explained to myself for some time that maybe it is normal for people to grow more at ease within a relationship, right? But in the end, the observations were inescapable. The entire relationship had reached a titling point. A single individual was constant throughout. Me? I was perpetually reaching out, making attempts to advance forward, practically maintaining the flame. If I didn't engage in a conversation, then there was no conversation to be had. Living together was reduced to mere roommates, detached, distant, and waiting for a moment for things to change. I waited, but nothing came. As the months blend into years, the gap only widened. One of the hardest truths I had to face about this marriage was the growing realization that I felt more isolated with my partner than I did alone on the road. I was bedridden one night, drained from the countless shifts I had to endure on the road. Trucking is not an occupation, but rather a way of life. Sometimes I leave from home expecting to return by evening, only to receive yet another call for a delivery that, although not worth it, forces me to accept. So, instead of returning home that day, I ended up doing deliveries for 2 days, and that turned into 3. The moment I got home, I had one simple objective in mind: shower, eat, sleep. With that in mind, I had no plans on texting Lily on my way back. She had always been accustomed to my erratic timetable. When I entered the house, it was silent apart from the subtle sound coming from the back porch. Lily was on the phone. She could be catching up with her sister or even one of her friends. I removed my boots and strolled towards the kitchen to get a glass of water. My focus was so much on quenching my throat that when I heard water, it didn't register at first. As I went to the porch, I could clearly hear her voice. I can't stand him anymore. I don't even know why am I still here. I was stopped. My mind tried to process what I just heard, but it was difficult. Was she talking about me? No, that didn't seem constructive. That was completely absurd. But then I heard her taking a breath and stifling a sigh. A break. There were some noises on the other end that I couldn't identify, so I was left looking puzzled, when suddenly she spoke clearly. He's just too convenient. Leaving him would be too much work. I haven't loved him in years. Words cannot quite describe my emotions at this moment. I had spent over a decade under the misconception that I had a significant other, someone who cherished me, even if it was a highly flawed relationship. I had overworked myself, deprived my daughter of her sleep, and neglected my own personal time just to build a life for us together. However, I learned the hard way that I wasn't even a bare minimum in her mind. In her words, she said I was merely a burden to her, an irritating convenience. I stood up and entered the bedroom where I walked towards the bedside, sitting down at the edge where I buried my face in my palms. I realized at that point my surroundings didn't exist. I was a million miles away. Had she really been faking being with me throughout my entire life? I don't know if she knew it, but somehow she had always managed to convince me that everything that transpired in our life was genuine. I started recalling all the years we spent together, trying to identify the moment anything began to transform. Was I in complete denial? Or was she a master of pretense? The deeper I searched, the more I comprehended that I had no clue who I had married. I remained there blankly staring into space without any clue of how long I had been sitting there. It could have felt like a couple of minutes or a couple of hours. It didn't matter. Time at that point was merely an illusion. As I still sat there in silence, suddenly the bedroom door began to creak open. Lily walked in the moment I had expected her to. The first step I caught her eye, and the shock in her face was apparent almost instantly. As she walked towards me, her expression changed into a feigned blank stare. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in," she said. She knew, or maybe she didn't know, at least not precisely how much I had overheard. Whatever the case, she knew something. I didn't say a word. I simply nodded, afraid that if I articulated anything, it would come out broken or pure rage. I saw her hesitation, as if she wanted to say more than she was allowed to. Without a single look at her, I forced myself off the bed, hoping to mutter something along the lines of "take a shower." It was of no importance if she responded or not. I made my way straight to the bathroom, ensured to lock the door behind me, and switched on the water. Standing under the stream, allowing the water to hit my skin, it was brutal, but nothing loosed the blockage in my chest. At this time, I was not aware of how long I needed or where I was headed. Whether 10 minutes or an hour, when stepping out of the bathroom, I still couldn't muster the motivation to face her in the bedroom. I had no words to offer, and preferred to avoid small talk, or worse, silence. After I made my way into the living room, I flipped on the TV, which I sat next to, and began to zone out. If I had a funny story about an unexpected happening during the journey, or something odd I witnessed while stopping at a truck stop, then I had stories to tell. In the case that I came home, I always managed to find something to speak about. But as for tonight, I was blank. And Lily? She remained silent. She was already deep in her sleep by the time I wished to hit the bed. I pondered all day while lying down on the bed, focusing at the ceiling. What was I doing here if her feelings were exactly like mine? The decision was straightforward when light streamed through the window. I was going to leave. Silently, I got up and ghosted through the house. A couple of belongings and I were united. That is all I took. Everything else? Who cares? My only intention with leaving was to become untied from this vicinity, and because of that, I was not going to take anything with me that made me feel anchored, not even a piece of paper with a written note. As I exited the house to engulf myself in the chilly morning environment, I was left clueless about what the future held for me. But quite frankly, I did not mind. I was ready to go anywhere else but there. I was with someone who was in a relationship with me out of pure laziness. Lily wanted to live an easy life. And well, now all of her wishes had been fulfilled. She wouldn't figure that anything was suspicious here. My work has ensured that I am always unpredictable. I could leave one day and do not return for a week if there were delays or last-minute dispatches. She was already used to it. During normal circumstances, if I headed out while she was still in bed, I would check in on her later in the day or give her a call instead. This time, there was simply no need. Withdrawal from the bank never raised suspicion, so I made a halt there before leaving town. I removed all of my funds, and in turn, I took my phone out, removed the SIM card, and snapped it in half. That was the only link she had to me, and now it was gone. No texts, no calls, no explanations. I knew she would come looking, but it would not be easy. Truck drivers do not work regular 9-to-5 shifts. Staying in the same place was not an option for us, and the people I had worked with were equally difficult to identify. Even if she tried, no one would give her a concrete answer. There was a chance that I had gone further north. Perhaps I'd changed firms. Or perhaps I was still driving around and happened to be somewhere on the road. All those chances were certainly dead ends. With no phone battery and no ties, I drove until the highway opened up before me. There was no destination, only the need to cover ground. I arrived at some obscure town in Texas where people do their own thing without prying too much. It was ideal. Absolutely no one knew me. There was absolutely no assumptions made of what I may want or need. I was simply another man with no past looking to start fresh. In the following few months, I thought that I would start feeling some sense of remorse or even shame for how I left my marriage. But like all assumptions with time, I started to realize that I did not miss Lily at all. I realized that silence never meant loneliness. Instead, it was something called peace. To stay productive, I began doing odd jobs here and there, not because I wanted to or needed to, but rather because I could. At times I did yard work for elderly people who owned a restaurant. In return, they paid me in delicious home-cooked meals rather than money. Other times I worked at my local auto shop where I helped out with fixing the trucks. It wasn't as complex as for me thinking it was a job. It was more or less about me enjoying my work. For the time being, saving myself for something along the lines of a reward, I had enough money put forth to survive with the lifted expectations looking over my shoulder. The saving grace for me came when I was finally unshackled from the never-ending shackles of a monotonous life of servitude. Having shifted to new surroundings offered me the freedom to live what can be termed as a reality. In contrast to my old life, I used to socialize exclusively with other truckers in rest stops or minimal chit-chat. Lily showed the grace of having patience for. Now, I had people who I considered friends, people that were not remotely bothered by my origin, men that knew how to let the past stay forgotten unless I felt like bringing it back to memory lane. Men who would, after an entire day's worth of working, sit down with me over conversations about examinations, burgers, and life as they uncorked the cheap drinks it accompanied. The best part? Having no responsibility or expectation from anyone or anything while being free for once. No one was waiting for me to check in or counting the days till I got home, so I embarked on a road trip if that's all it took to be happy. Everything I did during that time was solely because I wanted to, not because of any constraints. I could sleep in as much as I wanted, and I finally had the freedom to do what I will. Did she contact my old trucking friends or announce hiring? Undoubtedly did. The truth is, it doesn't matter. I woke up one day, got ready, and started my new life. A life where I no longer woke up feeling like a burden in my own house. Still to this day, I don't fully understand how it happened. My phone rang one day, and out of habitual instinct I answered. The familiar voice on the other side made my stomach tense. "Jake, it's me." At first, I did not say anything. What for? She, however, kept talking. Her voice was trembly, as if she was remembering 100 conversations that she spent rehearsing for. She told me she had never meant what she said that night, that rather she was venting her frustration and did not know how to express it. Then she had the audacity to tell me how she still loved me. Little did she know, after spending a year replaying her words in my mind, I knew the truth. She had been venting, but had simply chosen not to tell me. She was completely honest, just didn't expect me to hear it. Initially, I chose to disregard everything she said. Without saying a word to her, I blocked her number. To my surprise, however, she did not quit. To my shock, she changed her numbers and began sending me long, emotional texts filled with promises, apologies, and regret. She explained how she was trying to come to terms with the reality of being on her own without my presence, how she would lie awake at night filled with regret while trying to come to terms with the grave mistake which she had committed. To some extent, she did attempt to guilt-trip me by claiming I had hurt her, that I had left her without explaining anything, and that I needed to give her a chance so we could resolve this issue. But in reality, there was no issue for us to fix. I could see the pity right from the get-go. She regretted the repercussions, not the words she had so decisively voiced. She presumed I would always be available regardless of how much time and attention she devoted on nurturing our marriage. When I did decide to walk out, love was not what made her chase after me. It was her understanding that now her security blanket was gone. At long last, I gave her what she demanded, attention, just not in a way she anticipated. "I'll come back," I said, "but not for you. I'm coming back to put a formal end to this union." Nothing. For the first time in all those calls, all those messages, she could not justify anything, and to be honest, I did not care. In hindsight, I believed I would never become that kind of guy willing to just go missing. That was not the scheme. I did not set out with the idea of vanishing without a trace. The step I was trying to take was helping her comprehend how it feels to lose someone, to part with someone. I had wished that one day she would wake up and understand that I was something more than an object in her life, something similar to a piece of furniture which goes unnoticed until it is broken. But the longer I stayed, the more I understood that I was not missing her at all, not even a bit. Also, if I wasn't missing her, why would I come back in the first place? I realize now the signs were there all along, how she did not text me when I was driving, the manner in which I was the one to initiate any contact. For years, I told myself it was a rough patch, something every couple goes through. But correct me if I'm wrong. The truth was, I was just a handy option for her. I paid the bills. I provided her with structure. But did I love her? That settled long ago, and it seems I was too ready in accepting or mistaking the whole situation. However, if there is one thing this whole mess has taught me, is that being convenient is different from being loved. Allowing someone to put up with you is certainly not equal to being valued. If someone's relationship with you seems to stem from the idea of convenience as opposed to caring, there is no doubt they are not your partner. They simply inhabit the space where you exist. And there will come a time in your life when the relationship gets to a point where you feel as if you have to plead for a person to put in any effort. It is time to accept the hard truth. You have already lost. Once again, someone who does not appreciate you deserves to be left. Just walk away. Don't fight. Don't try to explain. When someone no longer cares about you, do yourself a favor and do not stay. There is nothing good for you there. The moment you walk away, you will recognize the amount of calm you had been lacking. Trust me, you'll be shocked as to how much serenity you were not getting. And the biggest lesson of all, never ignore the warning signs. If you feel unwanted, you probably are. If you constantly find yourself lost in thought contemplating whether or not someone still cares for you, you're most likely answered. I comprehended the clues for years but chose to differ because I wanted to fall for her and love the thing that I saw her as. That illusion shattered the moment I was faced with reality, making me accept the fact that I did not want to face. Was it painful to accept? Absolutely. I do wonder what my audience would have done. Now that you have consumed my story, would you have turned the other cheek? Or would you have faced the music, having a conversation with her? Gave her another opportunity to prove herself? Kindly tell me in the comments whether you would have done this or chose the path I had taken. If you have found this story intriguing, visually appealing, so to say, be sure to give it a thumbs up, share, subscribe. We all know someone out there waiting for something like this, so go help them.